In this lesson, we'll talk about how borders work and how to use them in CSS. So far, we have a variety of content on our website. Sometimes having too much content on a single page can be overwhelming for the user, since you can add as many headings, text, links, videos, and images as you like. When it comes to this, sometimes sectioning out our web page visually can be of great benefit when it comes to readability. To do this, we can add borders to our elements. Adding borders around elements on a web page is an important feature of web design, since it can be used to separate the contents of your web page. This in turn makes it easier for people to interpret the information presented on the page. The CSS border property is used to specify a border around a web element. For instance, a border could be applied around an image, a box, or text. A border is the band or strip around the edge of something. It wraps around the content and can have many different styles. There are three sub-properties when we want to apply specific styles to an element's border: border style, border color, and border width. Let's dive a little deeper into each one of these properties. The border style property defines what type of border you want to display on your web page. This property determines how the border lines look on the page. For example, it can be solid, dotted, or dashed. There's 10 different values you can choose from. You can see them in the example below. The border color property would, as you expect, specify the color of the border. Border color can accept color names or hex values. We learned hex values in a previous lesson, so if you don't remember how to obtain a specific color using hex values, I recommend viewing that lesson. Looking at the example below, suppose you want a solid border with the color red. You see that we've defined a border color with the name red, and in the output, you have a red border around the body element. Taking a look at the next example, we can see that the H2 element has a dashed border, and it has accepted a hex value of a shade of blue. When working with borders, we can also see how thick we want the border to be. In order to do this, we use the border width property to specify the thickness of our border. The border width property can take values of thin, medium, or thick. But if you want to use a more precise measurement, you can use numbers measured in pixels or ems. Looking at the example below, we can see that the body has a border width of thin. So it outputs a thin border around the body container, as you can see in the output on the right. The H2 container has a border width of 12 pixels, so you can see a thick dashed border of 12 pixels for the H2 container. The previous examples and topics were fairly straightforward, but to expand on this, we can actually add specific properties for each side of each border. Since there are 4 sides to a border, specifying what we want for each border is fairly simple. We covered border style, border color, and border width earlier. All of these properties can take more than one value. It can actually take up to 4 values. Right now, we know that typing in a single value to the property affects all the sides: top, right, bottom, and left. But if we typed in, say, 2 values, the first value would affect the top and the bottom. Then the second value would affect the right and the left sides. Things get a little trickier going to the 3 values. The first value will take the top. The second value affects the sides, which is the left and the right. And the third value affects the bottom. When we type in 4 values, the first would affect the top, the second affects the right, the third affects the bottom, and the fourth affects the left. It's a little hard to remember at first, but you'll remember it after you do a couple of times yourself. To better visualize my example earlier, here's an example of a multiple valued border style. In the input, the body has a border style taking 2 values, solid and dashed. This means that the top and bottom will be solid lines, and the left and right will be dashed. H2 has a border style of dotted, dashed, solid. This means that the top is dotted, the sides are dashed, and the bottom is solid. You can see this in the output. Here's an example of adding border color. The body's top is red, the sides are blue, and the bottom is green. H2 colors are written in specific hex values too. In this instance, the top and bottom are a shade of blue, and the sides are a shade of purple. This last example, we add the border width. The body has the top and the bottom as thick, and the sides are thin. H2 has the size specific to pixel values for each of the 4 sides. It is important to note that we can't use the generic border property to apply all of what we've learned so far. If you want to use the border property, it actually takes the values as you can see in the code below. Border takes the first value as border width, the second value as border style, and the third value as border color. Here's a quick example of it in action. The body container has a border of 4 pixels, solid line, and a red color. The H2 container has a border of 12 pixels, a dotted line, and a shade of blue. For further learning, please head over to the assignment section on Replit. It'll give you a great practice activity and further instruction on how CSS borders work.